I believed in us. We were high school sweethearts and our love story was the kind people dream of. 9 years of what I believed to be marital bliss shattered in an instant. It was a video message sent from an anonymous number that ripped my world apart. The video showed my wife at a bachelorette party. A night she told me was just about harmless fun with her friends. Turned out to be far from that. In the grainy footage I saw her with a man. Their actions clear and heart-wrenching. A tidal wave of betrayal washed over me. My heartbeat sounded loud in my ears. The video ended. But the image kept playing over and over in my mind. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted was leading a life I knew nothing about. I felt a strange combination of anger, heartbreak, and annoying sense of confusion. How did we get here? Was our love not real? I felt as though I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath me. I knew then I couldn't let this slide. The love I had for her, the memories we made, they demanded truth. I needed to know the extent of her infidelity. So with a heavy heart and a need for answers, I decided to hire a private investigator. It was a step I never thought I'd have to take, but here I was faced with the unthinkable. This was just the beginning of the unraveling. The day after the video arrived, I woke up with a purpose. The dull ache in my chest hadn't subsided, but there was a newfound determination in me. The decision to hire a private investigator was not taken lightly. It felt like admitting that my marriage was beyond saving. Yet I needed answers, a full understanding of the depth of my wife's betrayal. I spent the morning researching, sifting through local private investigation firms. I sought an experienced professional, someone who could discreetly uncover the truth. I finally settled on a firm with a stellar reputation for handling delicate domestic cases. I made the call and within minutes, I was pouring out my story to a stranger. The voice on the other end was calm, reassuring, and professional, promising to handle the case with the utmost discretion. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I had taken a step towards the truth, dread because of what that truth might reveal. I looked around our home, the home I thought was filled with love and trust. It felt different now, tainted by the bitter sting of betrayal. The private investigator would start work the next day. I braced myself for what was to come, and as I did, I realized that this was more than just about uncovering my wife's secrets. It was about me taking control, reclaiming my life from the devastation that had been thrust upon me. The path to truth was set and there was no turning back. In the days that followed, the private investigator began his work in earnest. The first set of reports came in just a week after the investigation began. As I read through them, my heart sank. My wife had not just cheated at the bachelorette party. She had been leading a double life for the past 2 years, meeting multiple men at hidden corners of our city, leaving a trail of deceit that now lay bare before me. Photographs, text messages, and even audio recordings, the evidence was overwhelming. I felt a cold anger welling up inside me, as the woman I thought I knew became a stranger in front of my eyes. Her laughter echoed in our home, a haunting reminder of the duplicity that had been living with me. Each revelation brought with it a fresh wave of pain, but it also brought clarity. The late-night phone calls she said were from work. The weekend trips with her girlfriends, the times when she seemed distant, it all started to make sense. As I sifted through the evidence, I felt a strange sense of vindication. My suspicions were confirmed, and while the truth was agonizing, it was better than the torment of uncertainty. The investigation had provided me with a solid ground to stand on, a foundation upon which I could start rebuilding my life. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of my journey towards reclaiming my life. With the bitter truth laid bare, I knew I needed to protect myself, and that meant securing my finances. The thought of my wife, the woman who had betrayed me, having access to my hard-earned money was repulsive. I spent the next day meeting with my bank, opening 2 new accounts in my name alone. It was an arduous process filled with endless paperwork, but every signature felt like a step towards my independence. Next, I removed my wife from my life insurance policy. It felt surreal, erasing her name from a document that at once signified our mutual trust and commitment. I knew this was just the beginning of the long bureaucratic journey of disentangling our lives, but it was a necessary step. Finally, I closed our joint credit card accounts. These cards, once symbols of our shared life and dreams, had become reminders of our shattered trust. I cut them up, each snip of the scissors echoing the finality of my decision. Throughout the day, I was fueled by a sense of urgency, a drive to take control of my life again. I was determined not to be a victim, but to be the architect of my own future. And while the emotional wounds were still raw, these practical steps gave me a sense of empowerment. I was not just reacting to my wife's betrayal, but proactively protecting myself. It was a small victory in a sea of turmoil, but it was my victory. And for now, that was enough. With my financial house in order, the next step was clear. I needed to seek legal counsel. It was time to make this separation official, to start the process of legally detaching myself from the woman who had broken our vows. I contacted a local attorney, renowned for his expertise in handling complex divorce cases. I laid out the evidence before him, the pile of photographs, text messages, and audio clips, each one a dagger in my heart. He listened attentively, his face a mask of professional empathy. When I was done, he assured me that the evidence was substantial, and that it would significantly influence the proceedings in my favor. We discussed the various aspects of the divorce, the division of assets, the fate of our house, and even the possibility of alimony. As I listened to him talk about the legal implications of my wife's infidelity, I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was as though we were discussing a business transaction, not the end of a relationship that at once meant the world to me. As I left his office, I felt an odd sense of relief. I had taken another major step in reclaiming control over my life. I was no longer just a man who had been cheated on. I was the man who was taking charge, making decisions, and protecting my interests. It was a small consolation, but at that moment it was enough to keep me moving forward. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the need to confront my wife grew stronger. With the knowledge of her betrayal and my lawyer's counsel, I decided it was time. I felt a strange calm wash over me as I prepared to face the woman who had once been the center of my world. One evening as she returned home, I asked her to sit down. There was a brief flicker of confusion in her eyes, quickly replaced by a mask of indifference. I wondered how many times she had worn that mask while lying to me. I confronted her about her infidelity, laying bare the evidence I had gathered. I watched as her face turned from surprise to shock, and then finally to guilt. But there was something else too, a hint of defiance that made my blood boil. I demanded that she leave our home. I wanted to erase her presence, to cleanse our shared space of the deceit that had tainted it. Her refusal to leave, however, was a punch to my gut. Her insistence on staying, even after everything she had done, was a slap in the face. Our home, once a sanctuary filled with love and laughter, had become a battlefield. The tension was palpable as we circled around each other, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words and pent-up emotions. Yet, amidst the chaos and pain, I found a shred of comfort in the confrontation. I had stood up for myself, faced the woman who had betrayed me, and demanded the respect I deserved. It was a small victory, but it was mine, and in that moment it gave me the strength to keep fighting. My wife's refusal to leave the house was a harsh blow. It felt as if she was mocking me, insisting on her presence in a home that no longer felt like ours. Despite the confrontation and the evidence of her infidelity, she seemed determined to hold her ground. In my frustration, I sought advice from my lawyer. The news was less than favorable. Despite the house being mine, I couldn't legally force her to leave the marital home until after the divorce was finalized. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The walls of our house, once filled with love, now felt like a prison. Living under the same roof with her was unbearable. Each shared glance was a reminder of her betrayal, each encounter a test of my patience. I felt a growing resentment towards her, an emotion that was new and unwelcome. However, I couldn't let her refusal to leave break me. I was already in the process of reclaiming my life, and I wasn't about to let her defiance stop me. I retreated into myself, choosing to focus on my well-being and the legal proceedings at hand. The house was no longer a home, but a battleground where we coexisted in uncomfortable silence. Yet, in the midst of this tense standoff, I held my ground. I knew that this was just a temporary obstacle, a storm that I had to weather before I could finally move on. And so, I braced myself for the challenging days ahead, determined to stand my ground. With each passing day, the tension within the house grew. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional forced conversations necessary for cohabitation. The standoff had turned into a waiting game, each of us anticipating the final verdict that would set us free from this toxic environment. In the midst of this strange silence, I continued to focus on the divorce proceedings. The paperwork seemed endless, each document a cold reminder of our crumbling marriage. Yet, there was a grim satisfaction in each completed form, each signed affidavit, small steps toward my newfound freedom. In the midst of this turmoil, I found pleasure in simple routines, like cooking my meals, going for a run, or even reading a book in the quiet corner of our house provided much-needed distractions from the harsh reality. Despite the strained atmosphere, I found myself growing stronger. I was no longer the same man who had discovered his wife's betrayal. I was evolving, becoming more resilient, more determined. With every passing day, I was less the victim and more the survivor. My wife's presence was a constant reminder of her infidelity, yet it also served as a catalyst, pushing me to fast-track the divorce proceedings. I was eager to reclaim my space, to banish the ghost of her betrayal from my life. But for now I had to be patient, to play the waiting game until the final verdict was delivered. The day finally arrived when the divorce proceedings officially began. The courtroom was sterile and intimidating. As I sat across from my wife, a surge of emotions washed over me. I was about to legally sever ties with the woman I had once vowed to spend my life with. The proceedings were complex and emotionally taxing. My lawyer presented the evidence of her infidelity, each piece a stark reminder of her betrayal. The court listened, the judge's face impassive, as he leafed through the documents, detailing my wife's double life. My wife's lawyer attempted to defend her, spinning tales and twisting truths. It was a difficult thing to witness, yet I remained stoic, focusing on the end goal. I reminded myself that this was a necessary step towards my freedom. Despite the bitter taste of proceedings left in my mouth, I felt a sense of progress. With each passing minute, I was closer to being free from the chains of this failed marriage. The courtroom, while intimidating, was the arena where I was finally able to voice my grievances, to demand justice for the wrong done to me. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt exhausted, yet strangely exhilarated. The journey was far from over, but I had survived the first battle. I was one step closer to reclaiming my life, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope for a brighter future. As the divorce proceedings continued, the emotional toll started to weigh heavily on me. Even though I was determined to move forward, I found myself grappling with feelings of loss, betrayal, and loneliness. I would sometimes find myself wandering through the house, the echoes of the past resonating off the walls. The memories of happier times would sneak up on me, bringing with them a fresh wave of pain. The woman I had once loved, the woman I had shared my dreams with, was now a stranger. There were nights when I lay awake, plagued by a sea of unanswered questions. Why did she cheat? Where did we go wrong? Could I have done something different? These thoughts would spin around in my head, leaving me feeling lost and confused. Despite the pain, I knew I had to confront these emotions. I allowed myself to grieve, to feel the loss. It was a part of the healing process, a necessary step towards moving on. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, I found peace in unexpected places. The chance meeting with an old friend led to regular coffee catch-ups. A neglected hobby was rediscovered, providing a welcome distraction. Slowly, I started building a support system, drawing strength from these small yet significant connections. The emotional struggle was real and it was hard, but I was learning to navigate it, finding my way through the storm one day at a time. And with each passing day, I felt a little stronger, a little more resilient. I was not just surviving, I was learning to thrive. Finally, the day of the final verdict arrived. As I sat in the courtroom, heart pounding, I felt an odd mix of fear and relief. Today, the legal ties that bound me to my wife would be severed. The judge delivered the verdict with a stern, impartial expression. The evidence of my wife's infidelity, coupled with my lawful conduct throughout the process, influenced the decision. The house was granted to me, a significant victory in the long, arduous battle. My wife's face remained unreadable as the verdict was pronounced, her emotions hidden behind a mask of indifference. I felt a pang of resentment towards her, yet there was also a sense of closure. As I left the courtroom, the finality of the situation hit me. I was now officially divorced. The chapter of my life that had been tainted by betrayal and pain was finally closed. With the final verdict, the reality of my new status settled in. I was a divorced man at 30. The house once filled with shared dreams and laughter was now solely mine. It felt larger, emptier. Yet it was a canvas ready for a fresh start. In the days that followed, I began the process of removing her presence from my space. I packed up her belongings, each item, a bitter reminder of our shared past. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls a new color, and even adopted a dog, a long-held dream of mine that she'd always vetoed. Yet the quiet was sometimes too loud. The absence of her presence was a constant reminder of the void that the end of our marriage had left in my life. I found myself grappling with the loneliness that the silence brought, but I also found moments of peace in it. Despite the pain, I started to see the glimmers of a new beginning in the aftermath. It was the start of a journey where I was in control, a journey towards healing and self-discovery. And while the road seemed long and arduous, I was ready to embark on it, one step at a time. As weeks turned into months, I slowly adjusted to my new normal. The house, once a stark reminder of my failed marriage, started to feel like home again. The silence, which had initially been overwhelming, was now comforting. My daily routines evolved without her presence. I started cooking for myself, trying out recipes that I had always wanted to. I spent evenings reading in the quiet corner of the house or playing with my new dog. I started to rebuild my social life, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. I took up hobbies that I had long neglected, finding joy in activities that I had forgotten about. I also started therapy, a decision that proved instrumental in my healing process. It provided a safe space to process my emotions, to understand my feelings of betrayal and grief, and to learn how to trust again. Adjusting to the new normal was not easy. There were moments of loneliness, moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull me down. But with each passing day, the pain dulled a bit, replaced by a newfound sense of hope. I was learning to live again, to find joy in the small things and to look forward to the future. The healing process was slow and often painful, but I was committed to it. I started to understand that it wasn't the linear journey. There were days when I felt strong and optimistic, and there were days when the pain seemed unbearable. But I held on, knowing that each day was a step towards healing. Therapy was a significant part of my healing journey. It helped me unpack the layers of betrayal, resentment, and grief. It helped me understand that it was okay to feel the way I did, that healing took time. I started to learn how to forgive, not for her, but for me. I started to indulge in self-care, taking time each day to do something that made me happy, whether it was reading a book, going for a run, or simply sitting in my backyard with my dog. These moments of solitude were therapeutic. I also started journaling, a practice that proved to be incredibly cathartic. Writing about my feelings, my fears, and my hopes helped me process my emotions. It provided an outlet for the whirlwind of emotions that often threatened to consume me. Through this healing process, I realized that I was more than just a man who had been cheated on. I was a survivor, a fighter. I was someone who had faced betrayal and heartbreak, yet was still standing. And with each passing day, I was becoming stronger. The year had passed since the day I discovered my wife's betrayal. Felt like a lifetime ago. I was not the same man I was back then. I had grown, evolved, and healed. I had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. I was finally able to look back at the past without the sharp sting of betrayal. I accepted that my marriage was a part of my life that had ended, a chapter that had closed. It was a part of my journey, but it did not define me. As I sat in my house, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The walls that once echoed with deceit were now filled with hope and resilience. The rooms that once felt cold and empty were now filled with warmth and love. Love for myself. I felt ready to move on, to open myself up to new experiences, new people. The thought of dating again was both exciting and terrifying. But I knew I was ready to take the leap. I was ready to explore this new chapter of my life. My journey had been a roller coaster of emotions filled with heartbreak and healing. But as I looked back, I realized that it was also a journey of self-discovery and growth. I had faced the worst and had come out stronger. I was ready for whatever life had in store for me. And so, with a sense of optimism and hope, I stepped into the new chapter of my life. Oh, I forgot to add, my ex-wife was thrown in jail for driving under the influence a few months after the divorce. She had lost her job, moved back in with her mom, Last I heard, she was still living at home at 31 years old.